while you are making your initial response, how would you characterize the scene at this time?
The scene was chaotic. There were a lot of emotions ranging from sadness to anger. 100 to 200 people still remaining on scene, and they were very upset, whether it was for providing medical aid or not providing medical aid. There was a lot of emotions on the scene.
In the area where you were rendering aid on 10th, there were still a large number of people there in that area when you finished rendering aid, when you changed your role into more of a monitoring force. There was still a large number of people out there.
Yes, there was.
Estimate maybe 50 to 100 right there on 10th Street.
I would still say 100 to 200 people there.
So the crowd hasn't really dispersed. Generally the same number of people are still there at the time.
Yes, it didn't disperse hardly at all.
And I'm assuming that the hostility and the negative comments and language continue towards you.
Yes, that's correct.
When you finished rendering aid, was it your job then to transition to securing the scene?
Yes, it was.
And what did you do in the focus of securing the scene? What was your first recollection of your task after the aid had ended?
After the aid had ended, my partner officers have already started clearing people off the crime scene. And I primarily just went to Officer Madu and his arrestee.
The arrestee this is the individual that was making it difficult for you all to do your jobs rendering aid?
Yes.
And this individual was physically hostile, not just verbally hostile?
Yes.
And that individual obviously had to be detained and restrained.
Yes, that's correct.
Was that individual ever identified that you were aware of?
He was.
Do you have a recollection yourself as to the name of that individual?
I do not.
At some point, when you were on scene and the crowd was hostile, were you in fear for your own safety?
No. I understand there could be an issue, but I wasn't necessarily in fear.
Were you you had a concern though?
Yes.
Okay, and it was somewhat alleviated by other officers arriving and conducting crowd control.
Yes.
Good morning, Officer Lindsay. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. You indicated that you felt like the scene was emotional, people were sad and angry. Can you tell us why and how you arrived at that conclusion?
Yes, that's correct. When I arrived, there were people yelling at us to leave, to go away. We also had people on scene asking us to help, to provide medical aid. People were screaming, help them. So it was emotional in different directions.
After you were done rendering aid, you kind of went to crowd control, we'll call it, correct?
Yes.
And the crowd, I think you said, was still relatively agitated, is that right?
Yes. By the time I was done with CPR, they had already formed a skirmish line and started backing people off of the area that I was tending to medical needs.
What conduct, if any, do you recall the crowd engaging in?
The crowd was still hostile while they had the skirmish line.
And what conduct did you observe that would cause you to identify it as hostile?
They were still yelling. They were gesturing, things of that nature made me believe they were still hostile.
Take a step back. When you arrived on scene, what did you observe?
When I arrived on scene, when I exited the patrol car, I saw to the left, there was 3 individuals laying on the ground. Officers were rendering aid. There's a bunch of people running and yelling. People were advising us that people were shot down the street towards 11th.
And when you got to this location, did you observe a person down on the ground?
Yes,
And did you run to that individual on the ground?
yes,
And the person who was down on the ground, did you observe whether they were had sustained any injury?
yes, I did.
And what type of injuries did that person sustain?
Gunshot wounds.
And the person who was down on the ground with gunshot wounds, did you begin rendering medical aid?
I did.
And the person you began rendering medical aid to, is that person present in this courtroom today?
Yes,
Could you please locate that person in this courtroom, describe what that person is wearing?
yes. The gentleman sitting right in front of me in the orange shirt with the white underneath.
We'd stipulate, Mr. Smiley Martin.